I believe that last episode was one where I specifically stated that I thought I would understand specifically the first half of the episode a bit better upon rewatch. And I can soundly say that that ended up being the case. So the episode started at the very beginning with a flashback to Frieren with the original adventuring party, the heroes party. And there is a line, there is a detail in one of the lines that I didn't necessarily hang on the significance of until rewatching it. So, when talking about Flame the Legendary Mage, the thing that Frieren says is that she's probably the only one who still remembers her face. I just kind of, internalized that as Frieren being the only one who remembers Flame. But I think the fact that she specified, I'm probably the only one who remembers her face, is important. Because, and then after that line is said, we see Himmel kind of gasp. I think I actually made a joke about it in the reaction when it happened. And that wasn't him, upon rewatch, I do not believe that that was him reacting to the fact that, oh, Frieren knew Flame. I think that that was him reacting on an emotional level to the idea that Frieren is aware and potentially negatively affected by the fact that she's the only one who remembers this person in a personal in a personal capacity, the only one who remembers what she looks like. This then carries forward to something that that we see in another flashback later in the slightly later in the episode to a different point in time where we see Himmel yet again having statues made of him. And I say yet again because this is the second or third time that this has been something that we've been shown in the series, is Himmel having statues made of himself and at times also the entire adventuring party. And and he says something about how he's not doing it for him. He's doing it so that other people remember. And I think that the way he says, the way that he explains his reasoning for having these statues made is a bit unclear. I believe that I was confused at his explanation during my initial watch, and I think I still would have been confused if I, again, didn't catch specifically how that previous line that I just talked about was delivered. I think that the reason, arguably, potentially, maybe I'm reading too much into things, I think that potentially the reason why Himmel became so, I'm not, I think obsession's too strong of a word, but the reason why he became a bit fixated on trying to have all these statues made is because he realized that Frieren is obviously going to outlive him and the rest of the adventuring party. And when they are gone, she will eventually get to a point in her life where the other members of the hero's party become to her the same way that Flame is to the rest of the world, where they are largely forgotten and treated, in keeping with the title of the episode, like a fairy tale, while she's just kind of isolated and with a feeling of loneliness, being the only one who remembers what they look like. And this, I think that part of the reason why I think that this understanding is what was intended is because it also makes the, again, the another later scene towards the end of the first half of the episode where they are in the village square at the Remembrance Day, I think it was called, whatever, the holiday, the festival. When she asks the merchant, the elderly merchant, like, are people still going to be doing this in 100 years? And he's like, oh yeah, definitely. But because of her long life, and because we know that there's 1,000 years separating Flame, Frieren's interactions with Flame to now, Frieren then asks, are they still going to be doing it 1,000 years? And he's less certain about that. But there's a chance. And that chance, I think, is what Himmel was playing at. So, yeah, that is probably I've picked up on a bunch of little things as I rewatch, all these different episodes before moving on to the next. But I think that that's probably the biggest revelation, so to speak, that I've had so far upon rewatching an episode. And Yeah, it's so that was really nice to see. Second half of the episode, I think I gleaned all of the major points of interest the first time around. But I will say about that second half of the episode, it did, especially after having some time to sit with it. I was already thinking about some of these things as I was seeing as I was seeing things presented to me initially. But especially having some time to sit with it, I have some thoughts and some opinions and feelings about the lore and world building of this series and this world regarding elves and demons as a race. I'm not going to get into those things now, but I have some thoughts, and I don't know if we're going to get any more tidbits and facets of backstory for elves this episode. I have a feeling we're going to learn a couple more things about demons. So, with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into episode 8 of Frieren Beyond Journey's End, starting in 3, 2, 1, go. Oh god, the volume is a little too loud. Okay, that should be good. Okay, and not surprisingly, we were picking up right where we left off. With a slight reminder, a little bit of the end of last episode reminding us, like, hey, this is where we're at. And now the warning slash threat. Oh yes, she looks so defeated. I will say, magical wires like that are one of the coolest things I've seen in anime. I've seen it probably 3 or 4 times in different series. Makes sense. Good job, you pulled her up slightly higher. I was gonna say, she could just, attack you. I was gonna say kill, but it looks like she's feeling generous. Oh, brutal! That was sick. Yeah, what exactly was his plan, by the way, for explaining this? Like, I don't know. I'm not gonna get too into that just because, like, what do I want to say? The thoughts that I have about the way that that demon went about what he just tried to do kind of plays into some of the wider thoughts that I'm currently having about the way demons have been presented in the series. And but I don't want to commit too heavily to any particular beliefs or ideas until at the very least at the end of this episode. Depending on how this episode goes, maybe even the post episode stuff, I'll talk about these things that I've been hinting at. But yeah, I am. I will say, regardless of what else happens this episode, though, I'm looking forward to rewatching that intro a couple of times because that looked really cool. And even with how quick it also just very cleanly animated too. It was cool. I want to see that. I want to watch that again. And I was yeah, I don't know. I was also curious how I was kind of curious how that fight was actually going to play out because just yeah, I don't know. I was curious how that was going to play out with how whether Frieren was going to be more on the like defensive or offensive, how she was going to handle the wires because again, if like that demon just like pretty much instantly killed that guard. So I was curious how she was going to deal with that and it was simple. With experience, she knew to just put a barrier around her neck. That's a interesting life lesson, Stark. My mouth's a little dry, probably because I talked so much for my intro. Cap wasn't going on my water bottle. Oh? You don't think so? Hmm. Uh, you good, buddy? I don't know. I have a hard time putting too much stock. I have a hard time putting too much stock in Stark's assessment just because he doesn't have battle experience. Like we know he's strong, but being strong doesn't doesn't necessarily make you able to gauge the strength of another. So, I mean, case in point, we just saw this drop guy get get one shot by Frieren because he didn't think that she was that strong. So, and you know, Frieren's own assessment was that he didn't have battle experience. So it's like, oh well, maybe that's why he didn't realize it. But like again, same thing is true for Stark. Oh, shut up. Yeah, that's what you're going with. I like that this guy recognizes the situation. I like this guy. He's very astute. Gonna try to talk your way out of this one, buddy. Let's hear it. What do you got? Oh, what the hell? Blood magic? I agree. Whoo! Speaking of sick kinds of magic, oh, I love Dead Man Wonderland. I love Dead Man Wonderland, and this has given me some strong vibes back to that. Oh, hemomancy, baby. I haven't mentioned it since like one of the earliest episodes, but Character design for the eyes. Sick. Yo, I hope Frieren doesn't kill this guy this episode. I want him to stick around. I love his magic. Or maybe it's technically a demonic ability or something. I don't care. You know what I'm saying. I like his powers. I want to see more of it. Also, I like how she's just chilling. She does not care. Is my camera messing up? I can't tell. Spotted. Look at her being all discreet. Well, yes and no. She did leave, but somebody else kind of did the breaking out in a sense. Is that what we call those? Mana particles? I mean, but like, hmm. Simultaneously chiding them while also encouraging them, but also seemingly ready to just abandon them. What the hell? Peak. uh, Poor Fern has to be the parental figure, regardless of who she's with. What was I saying? Oh, I feel like Frieren, though, really didn't have much faith in the leadership of the town, given that she, like, I understand her assessment being like, don't you think it's safe to assume that they would expect me to have been the killer of the guard? But also, like, oh, who the hell are you? Are you Aura? I guess so. That's that was a weird. I don't know if it was just the shot or that's just how her design is, but she looks weird. Oh yeah, that looks fucking ominous. Covering one of her eyes and just like shrouding part of her face in shadow. But like I mentioned how the that town leader guy, how he made like the astute observation of like, one of your men is gone, by the way. And I recognize that that mage knows the significance of killing a guard, so I don't think she just did that and escaped. Um, and yeah, the fact that Frieren seemingly didn't consider that he would have considered that, arguably speaks to her underestimating people. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. Or maybe she just wants to go act on her own, and she was using that as a cover. She did seem rather excited by the prospect of going and confronting Aura. So there's a case to be made either way, I suppose. That is one thing. For better or worse, this series does seem to kind of specialize in vagary. Qual, we met him. He's dead. Explosion. Okay. This is not the. Which is kind of why Qual was at a massive disadvantage, having been sealed for 80 years. Ooh, pupil dilation. Or opposite of dilation. It shrunted. Ooh, pretty. Pretty eye. I'm glad I mentioned the eyes earlier, because there have been a lot more eye shots. Full eye shots this episode. Interesting. Oh, accidentally revealed some information that you probably shouldn't have, buddy. What do they hope to accomplish just by leaving him sitting here? Hmm. I don't expect that this is a winning strategy on their part. Also, speaking of eyes and such, this is very different from like the beauty of eyes that we've seen that I've been mostly highlighting when talking about them. But I like how the girl demon just constantly looks like she has a vacant expression, in large part because of her eyes. Can you stop shaking? You're literally just needing to cut a rope. Okay, so this is going to be a recurrent theme, it seems. Not necessarily cowardice, but fear in the face of danger and conflict. You need to sharpen your blades more, kid. We better hear in a couple of minutes that these ropes have been reinforced with magic. Oh. Well, um. Oh, okay. For a second, I thought we were going in a different direction. Uh-oh, they're already back. And he's frozen. And he's shaking. And now he feels insulted. Time to step up, Stark. Okay. But now he has ammo. Ooh. You know, I said earlier that I didn't want Frieren to kill this demon this episode. That goes for you too, Stark. Please don't kill him this episode. Who said he was alone? He's gonna look up and Fern's gonna be through the window. Little late for that. Oh! We don't even get to see a frontal shot of her before the attack. Nice. And there she is. Oh, that's a thumbnail right there. I don't know if you should do that. The killing spell, of course. Yeah, that. I remembered the name. Of course I did. Oh. So this isn't ordinary offensive magic. Can't say I'm surprised. I mean, this seems like a good opportunity to just take care of the problem, no? Eh. I am happy because, you know, as I've said multiple times, I want that guy to live. But seems like potentially a questionable decision. Nice. How did you live? Slew more demons than anyone else in history. You're the Slayer. One of the geniuses I despise. Cool. That was a very cool episode. I am glad that we spent the entire episode on this plot line. I am very glad that we spent the entire episode on this plot line. The at the end of last episode, I had the criticism of the kind of the story structure, the way that the anime, the narrative has been structured thus far. I had some criticism of that and the way that like certain storylines have been split across episodes thus far, and it was something that I did feel. I don't think I necessarily vocalized this part of my argument during while I was talking about it, but it is the kind of thing where I do feel as though the extent to which I am the extent to which I am actually of that opinion or not will probably change depending on how well I feel that story structure is executed in future episodes. Does that make sense? Like, if we continue, like, if for example, the next, half dozen episodes, I felt similarly to how I felt about, the last episode, where it just felt a little incongruous with the way that the two that the two parts of the episode were split, then I would start to feel like it was an overall problem of the story at large, of the series as a whole. But if it is the case that, like, from here on out, or at least, going forward for the majority of episodes, if I am not feeling that way, then I think it can be safely chalked up to more or less a bit of the series just having a bit of a rocky start in its and like people in the comments have been talking about, like, how this is a result of, it being such a faithful adaptation, or what have you. And like, I get that, I do, and I get not wanting to shuffle things around. Like, believe me, I understand that. I I get it, but and so I will be interested to see if we did just get kind of a rocky start with a bit of clunkiness in the beginning as a consequence of, trying to be a very thorough and like one-to-one kind of adaptation. And if Studio Madhouse is able to kind of smooth that out going forward. And that will depend on a lot of factors. I'm not going to try to, break down like criteria for, oh, well, if they do XYZ, then I'll feel this way. If they do ABC, then I'll feel more this way. I'm not going to do that, but I will, that will be like one of the things that I just try to like make a little note of here and there on occasion as we move forward. But yeah, so that's one thing, is I'm glad that we were on this plot line for the entire episode, because I feel it did justice to this plot line, and two, because this plot line is just really damn cool in my opinion. I think it is very obviously the most action oriented episode that we've had thus far. Like, we had the fight between Stark and the dragon, and I think that's probably second after, some of the stuff we got this episode. But like some of the other combat that we've had thus far, Qual, who came up again this episode, like the fight between Frieren and Fern and Qual, that was neat, but it's not the kind of like it's not the kind of action or combat that you would expect from like your average shonen series, right? It didn't really feel like the action was the point of the fight, if that makes sense, right? It felt like the point of the fight was more about was about the circumstances, if that makes sense, rather than the fight itself. Whereas like a lot of times, even though I'm not saying that, shonen oftentimes has meaningless fights in combat. There are reasons why the action takes place, but also part of the, main draw of the series oftentimes for shonen series is, oh cool, flashy combat. And I feel like even though it wasn't, wall to wall action this episode, the action that we got was really cool. And again, I think that part of the reason that I thought the action this episode was so cool is because it hit on some things that I just personally think are really cool. Like the guy who, Drott, the demon who got killed at the beginning of the episode, like the wires. Again, I've only seen that a couple of times in anime, but like every time I see it, it's just so damn cool. I think the biggest example is actually, funnily enough, another Studio Madhouse series, Hellsing Ultimate, where you have the butler, Walter C. Dornez, who uses, like wires to just similarly to what Drott tried to do, just kind of, eviscerate people, tear them apart. And then the blood magic is very cool, again, just in concept, and then also in practice, specifically the way that Luger, whatever. Somebody in the comments told me that his name translates just to straight up liar in German, so haha. Very simple wordplay, I suppose. But the way that it is practically executed for this character in this series, it's very versatile, which I think is very interesting. It seems very versatile, and again, I'm glad he didn't die because I really want to see more of that. And couple of other things, like I I mentioned at the beginning of the episode how I expected us to learn more about demons, and while we saw some more dialogue and actions from the demon characters in this episode, we didn't learn too much more about them in terms of like what makes them tick, which is kind of the direction I was hoping to see. However, even though we didn't get that, what we did get, a point that I started to make, but I got interrupted by things happening. There a lot of times where I stopped this. There were several times this episode where I very much stopped myself in the middle of a point because I was like, hold on, what's happening here? Because again, it was just a very cool episode, a lot of things happening. But the little bit of information that we got about how demons spend like their entire lives honing their craft on a specific kind of magic, I thought that was really interesting. And even though we didn't get demonic insights into demons, we did, in a bit of a twist from kind of what I was expecting slash hoping to see, we got demonic insights into other magic practitioners in the way that it's also to an extent just Luger's. I'm gonna keep saying this fool's name. I should probably look at what his name actually is. But I also don't want to spend like too long looking for it. Lugner. How do you pronounce it? I'm not even gonna try. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna say Luger for right now. Lugner. I feel like I'm pronouncing it wrong. God, I got so obsessed with his name. Forgot what I was saying. The perspective that we're getting from him is partially just his personal perspective. The way that he hates geniuses because he feels that it kind of flies in the face of like hard-earned, not hard-earned talent, but hard-earned ability. There's a phrase I'm going for here. I'm tripping all over myself. Yikes. Anyways, moving on. But we got to see a bit of like, again, demonic insights into how demons view other magic practitioners and how to a very small extent, how they view humans and just other races in general. And I want to see more of that. I do want to see more of that. Again, I initially thought that the series was going to be very heavily focused on small scale, on like characters and their interpersonal interactions and dynamics. And I thought that it was going to be like very heavily focused on, like who is Frieren as a person? Who is Fern as a person? Who is Stark as a person? What do their interactions and dialogues with each other? What do they say about these characters' relationships? And what does it say about the group dynamic? And well, I still think that that's very much something that the show is going to be tackling and, showing us. It is, in a weird way, while it's doing so with very slow presentation, it is also, in a sense, kind of quickly getting into larger topics of that have just like have much broader a much broader scale of conversation about like, again, just like the way that these different races exist in this world. And so yeah, I'm still very curious to see how they go about saying and doing certain things with the narrative, because yeah, there's just I'm wondering, as I kind of quipped earlier in the episode, if there's one thing this series does well, it's vagary. And I'm curious to see to what extent certain questions that I have will be answered. I'm curious to see to what extent certain questions that I haven't even yet considered are going to be answered. And I'm curious to see what things will be arguably intentionally left up to interpretation for the viewer. So yeah, there's a lot at play, and I feel like they are trying to advance multiple storylines and avenues of storytelling at like a fairly comparable pace. like sometimes with series you see like, oh, we're going to focus on this thing, and then after we've kind of satisfactorily addressed this thing for a little while, we're going to switch over to focusing on this other thing, and then we're going to move over here. And whether it's focusing on different characters or whether it's focusing, from a small scale goal to a large scale goal, it just like that's a lot of times series like to do that, right? And it feels to me at the moment kind of like Frieren is trying to focus on a few different things and again, just kind of increment them all at a somewhat even pace. And so, yeah, I'm curious to see how well they end up executing on that after, like once we get further. In a sense, I can't say how well they execute on it until I get to the very end of the story, but I'll just be curious to see, like, as we move on and as we get to like certain breakpoints, like, I don't know if this plot line is going to be the entire next episode or what, but once we get to what will probably feel very much like organic stopping points almost in the story, I'm curious to at those points reflect back and be like, okay, now that we're here, now that we're at this point, looking back, what were the things that I feel they did well in how they got us to this point? Oh God, I just smacked the fuck out of the mic. So yeah, it's yeah, I just a lot of different things to pay attention to, and yeah, I I think I touched on most of the things I wanted to address. I think one other point though, in keeping with talking about Luger again, I know there's an N in there. It feels weird to try to pronounce it with that N. So to the end that I have a hard time with this guy's name. I kind of hope he dies in the next episode after we get to see a bit more of his power. But if he does, then I don't have to worry about pronouncing his name. If he doesn't, I get to see more of his hemomancy. So I win either way. Truly what we call a win-win situation. Anywho, I do think that his personal belief that I already kind of touched on with the kind of innate genius versus hard-earned talent or whatever you want to call it versus hard-earned, skill or proficiency. I do think that is very often an interesting theme to see in media, in narratives. I think that I think that it's one of those things where like it is very easy to do it in a boring way, to present it portray it in a very boring manner, but it is a theme that I feel when I see it, I feel like it is often done in a way that feels new, and so it's a theme that I kind of like seeing just because I feel like almost every time I see it, it feels new and it feels fresh and it feels enjoyable and entertaining to see. There are a lot of different ways that you can present in media, like different kinds of clashes of ideals, and some of them are, in my opinion, just more interesting than others. Some of them are less interesting than others, and to an extent, that's going to depend on the person, of course, but it's also going to depend on how well it's done. I can't remember if I mentioned it in the Frieren reactions or if it was in another series, but I don't actually have a problem with tropes and cliches if they are done well. There is a way to do tropes and cliches, execute on them in a way that they are still successful, that they are still like good mediums for storytelling. They're not inherently bad. Like they become tropes and cliches for a reason because at their core they're actually quite good. So I feel like when it comes to like different kinds of clashings of ideals, this notion of like, again, the geniuses versus hard workers, so to speak, which isn't, it's a bit of a false dichotomy. You can be both or neither, but regardless, that's when you set these two ideas against each other specifically. I just feel like there is oftentimes room to do interesting things with that, and so I'll be curious to see if that actually, if that is like an actual relevant factor in the way that we are going to be moving forward with these characters, or if that was just kind of like, hey, here's a little, here's a little looky-loo into the thought processes of this demon, and now we're gonna kill him next episode, and you're never gonna hear about those again. That could be, but again, we'll see. 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 I guess I said that was the last thing, but one more last thing, just because I have been talking about this character a lot. I hope we get a little bit more of a flashback to that battlefield. Like, we got hints that he knew who Frieren was, right? I wasn't surprised to see that he knew her. I wasn't surprised that he saw her on the battlefield. I am surprised that he seemingly was being stared down by her on the battlefield and lived to tell the tale. So I am kind of wondering what happened there. I'm wondering if, some other demon, maybe Aura herself or the guillotine herself, maybe she showed up and intervened. I don't know. Maybe there are a number of things that could have happened to interfere with that fight, but like, there was a number of demons lying slaughtered on the ground in that little brief snippet we saw. And so the fact that our buddy Luger somehow was able to just get away, I'm left with a couple question marks about how that happened. But regardless, I think that is probably going to be it. I think that I am going to continue to hold on to, again, at the very beginning of this video, as we were getting ready to get into watching the episode, I mentioned that, like, I have some thoughts about the ways that we have been, the little bits of explanation we've been given thus far about elves as a race and about demons as a race. And I mentioned that I might expand on those later. I think for the moment, I'm going to continue sitting on those. I think that, especially since we are still continuing with this same plot line into the next episode, I do think I'm going to continue to sit on those ideas, and I will talk about them later if they become relevant. So yeah, that's going to be it for this episode and this video. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out other videos on the channel if you are so inclined to do so. And until I see you in the next one, take care. Bye-bye.